Okay, hey guys, it's Eric from foundersbeta.com, and I'm delighted to have Ryan from Equivesto today. Ryan, thanks so much for joining today.
Thanks, Eric. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So today we're talking about fundraising for startups, and we're looking to learn more about tips and tactics with Ryan. So Ryan, maybe talk about your platform and how it got started.
Sure. Equivesto is a Toronto-based equity crowdfunding platform. We operate in Ontario, BC, Nova Scotia, Alberta. So essentially, we're an online location where small businesses and startups can raise up to $1.5 million from their community. So this is sort of different than most of the types of investments or the portals that you've seen before. It's strictly equity, and it's at a location where Canadian investors, not just accredited, can participate and own a little bit of your company for as little as $100.
So,
So
so yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, so our history is pretty long but pretty short. So we actually started this company back in 2016, 2017, out of personal need. You know, me and my co-founder, we had a bunch of startups in the past, and we tried to seek funding the more traditional way. You know, going to angels, asking friends and family. And we realized, it's extremely difficult to raise finances and the appropriate finances for your business. Unless you had a really strong network or you come from privilege, it's nearly impossible. So we started doing our research, and we found that there was this other environment out there, this entire world of something called equity crowdfunding. And globally, this has been happening for almost 5 to 10 years. Israel is a big example of that. The United States, the UK, they've been doing it for quite a while. But in Canada, we're really backwards here. Our banking systems are old. So it takes a long time for it to pass compliance. So actually, in that exact same year that we were looking for an idea, that concept, the rules changed in Canada. So in 2017, it allowed for this type of mechanism where people in the community could start to buy shares within restrictions of these businesses. So it's a little bit of right place and right time. But at the same time, it took us 3 years to get registered in this space, and now we're operational. So that's great.
Awesome. That's so exciting because I think fundraising is much needed in Canada, right? Compared to US and other countries.
Oh, absolutely. We have
Yeah,
some of the best startups here. And then the unfortunate fact is that, not nearly enough funding to support those ideas. So
right. Definitely, because we need to fuel the innovators out there, and I think obviously putting in capital into startups that are doing big things, right, is such a key. Yeah, that's great. So I always ask I always ask the guests, when they're starting out, how did you like assemble your team and meet your co-founder? How did that come about?
yeah, so co-founder was not too hard. Actually, Alex and myself, we both went to the same university, same program. And we were roommates actually for a couple of years. And we
Oh,
always
that's
knew that we would
wonderful.
sort of, start a business together one day. He went down the finance path. I went down the technology path. So it was inevitable to build a fintech. So that's where Equivesto, came from.
Cool, awesome. Let's talk about fundraising. We have many startups on Founders Beta. They're looking to raise funds. At what stage do you recommend founders looking to raising funds?
Yeah, capital is useful at all stages. There's often a saying that you should always be fundraising, and it helps you obtain your goals faster. It gets you the right talent and amplify your reach. So I think from day one, you sort of need a sort of funding strategy, an idea, a concept of how you're going to get that capital in order to execute the goals you want to obtain. And undercapitalization is one of the main reasons that businesses fail. And a lot of businesses kind of have this concept: if I build this thing and in my basement and I release it to the public, all of a sudden it's going to be, $1 million on day one. But the truth is, sometimes it takes a long time to get to that point. There's so many factors. There's so much competition. You really just need to create that buffer for yourself in order to give yourself a fair chance into making it a successful business. So I think the most important thing you probably want to determine is sort of the type of capital that you're raising. All types of businesses need different types of capital, whether it's equity, debt, mezzanine, whatever it is, and whatever you're going to be using it for is extremely important. And then how are you going to service that debt, or that repay those investors in the future? That's a really important consideration. And
Right.
so, early stage capital is a really good indicator of future success. And so it's really imperative that, you create that strategy from day one. Know your operating costs, know what it's going to take to get to the next stage, and don't be afraid to take that calculated risk. One of the biggest pieces of advice I have is a lot of founders are a little bit, they hold their equity so close to themselves, and they say, oh, if I gave up 10% of my company, will it really be mine? And what they don't realize is 100% of nothing is still nothing. And
True.
sometimes, in order to achieve your goals, you need to bring in partnership. And what's amazing is in the world of, say, equity crowdfunding, these investors are also part of your community and help motivate you to reach your goals. So there's a lot of surrounding factors that actually improve that for these founders.
Right. Yeah, those are actually great pointers for our audience. Yeah. So moving forward, talk about what's the difference between like traditional fundraising versus equity crowdfunding.
Yeah, traditional fundraising often works in the direction of institution to business. So whether that's like a bank to a small business, or a VC to a startup, or an angel investor to an entrepreneur, it usually comes with this idea of an institution trying to make return, or as much return as possible, for their stakeholders. So with that becomes a lot of this external pressure. And with a traditional sense, we've been finding, and this from working with entrepreneurs who have worked with VCs and angels and groups, things like entrepreneur burnout, aggressive focus on sales opposed to the other aspects of your business, disregard for HR or other really important aspects of your company, and then premature IPOs. Oh man, that's one of the worst things.
Yeah. Right, for sure.
Yeah. So what's different than that is the crowdfunding. On the other hand, it allows the companies to be supported by their greater community. Mm-hmm. So these are not people who are coming in with big checks. They're smaller pieces of investment. And crowdfunding doesn't just strictly mean equity crowdfunding. There are actually other types that more people are more familiar with, which are reward-based and donation-based crowdfunding. So rewards are like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where you're selling a product or pre-purchasing a product in exchange for capital. And then for donation-based, like GoFundMe, it's simply donating towards a cause. So equity crowdfunding is really, really different than that. And it's because it's in exchange for your contribution, you're getting a little bit of ownership in the company. So it's a securities transaction. And so these people are becoming micro investors. But because the check size is smaller, usually these people don't necessarily care as much about getting that 10x return. They do care about getting return, but other factors were involved in them making the decision investing in you. It's usually because they care about the things you care about. And it's more about, the cause, it's more about the impact than anything else, and any other types of capital. So there's an added bonus of going with equity crowdfunding, but I may be biased.
Right. Right. Yeah. So maybe talk about the investor side on your platform. How does that work? Like,
yeah, the
investor side, able to take a look at the companies or be able to invest?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a little bit of a veil. So we don't expose essentially the details of a company unless you're deemed sort of suitable for the investment. But yes, like in general, this is a platform meant to be accessible to most people out there. So right now we're operable in Ontario, BC, Alberta, and Nova Scotia. So investors have to be from those regions. Right. They have to be above the age of 18, so the age of majority. And also deemed suitable. So we have a compliance team that there's a bit of a form that you have to fill out. It's not extensive. It's about 3 minutes to 5 minutes. It's similar things that you would put into, say, setting up a Wealthsimple account or a bank account.
Right. Makes sense.
We just got to make sure, because these are really high risk investments. It's a startup, and it can go both ways, right? It can flop. And so we are just making sure that people have the financial capacity in order to take on these risks, but it's also very carefully managed by limiting, say, the investment amounts. So the government has a bunch of rules on the limits on how much people can invest. So for most regular investors, you could only put up to $2,500 per deal, $10,000 per year. So there's a lot of restrictions in Canada. We're trying to grow that, expand that by proving to the regulators that, we are doing good enough suitability that they could start to increase that. But obviously it's a new market in Canada, and they want to start with the bar low and then eventually lead to something a little bit more conducive to actually making big bucks on in the private space. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. So let's talk about for startups that are interested in fundraising. How does your platform work?
Sure. So for startups who are interested in raising with us, it just starts with a conversation. There's an apply, section of our site, but before you even get it there, it's really about that talking to yourself, thinking to yourself, how much capital do I need, and why do I need it? And if you answer those two questions, and you see equity as a solid option, there's a whole library of information that we've put on our site to help companies determine whether equity crowdfunding is right for them, so that they could self-assess, say, hey, actually, no, I don't, debt might be more reasonable for me. Or I have a product, I have a product that I want to build. So maybe a Kickstarter campaign might make more sense because I could pre-sell those products. But for other groups that have a service or something that they can't necessarily sell, they could go and look at Equivesto as an option, and then simply click apply. So in the apply section, there's a short form, high level application, which just pretty much says how much you want to raise. It's between $25,000 and 1.5 million.
Right.
Are you from this region? Do you have a community of some sort or an impactful mission? And if you meet all those qualifications, then one of our dealing representatives will start to talk to you and explain to you the Equivesto process. Then it becomes the not so fun part, which is the due diligence side of things. So what's different with us than most VCs or angels is, angels and VCs, they tend to come to you with a valuation or a number. We are actually, since we're a marketplace, we work on both sides, and we want to create the best number possible for the investor and for the issuer, the company. So we talk with the company, and we work out a really fair number where we think, this is what the going rate for something that's in the same space right now, and this will help you obtain your goals without diluting you too much.
Right.
So that's part of that conversation, and then structuring the deal, running the due diligence, and then finally creating the campaign page, which is my favorite part, and I'm usually part of that team.
Nice.
I get to do the fun stuff, which is creating the campaign page and the marketing strategy, because this is also crowdfunding, right? And it's about getting as many members of the community involved and bringing those people in and making them feel, like they're an integral part of your team. And that communicating that is sometimes difficult for most founders. So we really sit down with the groups, and we help them work out these strategies, because it's very new, and bringing in, a few hundred investors is sometimes difficult to manage. So we work with them on that. And then once that's done, it's clicking launch, running a 30 to 90 day campaign. And then, and if everything goes right, then you've got your funding and some.
Nice. Any particular tip that might help our audience if, they're looking to apply? Any particular, like on the application, or anything that might help them kind of stand out?
Stand out, not necessarily, because we definitely want to be industry agnostic. And I think one of the biggest issues with a lot of the angel groups and the VCs is they put a lot of their own personal bias into their decision-making process.
I see.
So, obviously it's a very tight board, and it's their prerogative. It's their money.
That's right.
They have their own sort of preconceived notions about what types of businesses can succeed and won't succeed. So really what we're trying to do is not be the judge of that. As long as as a company can pass by the sort of verification, you pass the KYC and AML, you're not trying to steal people's money and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's a sound enough idea. We'll let the community and the crowd police this. We'll let them decide what companies should succeed and shouldn't succeed based on their vote, which is essentially their dollar. And it's a really excellent way of doing things, because it also provides validation to the founders that, hey, these 100 people, these 1,000 people actually believe in me. And it becomes a growing cycle. The snowball starts to roll, and it really helps propel a lot of great businesses forward.
Right. And what kind of companies have you seen so far on the platform, or would be suitable for it?
Yeah, so right now it's really, really diverse. Like, we just closed our first round, which was a gold mining company, a junior mining company.
Oh, interesting.
Exactly, yeah, and it really ranges. They're from BC, but they're actually doing their operations here in Ontario. They're mining in Ontario, and yeah, it was an interesting relationship. A great group of guys. They come from the industry. They had a very strong base of knowledge and experience, and they love the concept of equity crowdfunding, which is getting the community involved, getting people access to these types of normally private equity deals that people would never get an access to unless they were rich. So it was very interesting working with them, and they did it at a massive pace. That I think in less than 20 days, they were able to close their round, like over 160% funded.
Wow,
so
that's
very good
nice.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a great experience. And then two other companies we have on our site. One's a sustainable coffee company, so they're single package coffee, sustainable pods.
Right, I saw that on the Twitter feed. Right.
Yeah. It's really, they're really interesting. They're extremely focused on creating zero impact with their product, as well as being really great tasting coffee, right? That's the biggest issue, is there's usually this balance, oh, I want to be super sustainable, so I'm gonna miss out on this other aspect, which is so important. Does it taste good? And theirs actually tastes good. So it's really, it's quite amazing what they're trying to achieve, and with their partnerships and their growth projections. Yeah, we're quite happy working with them. And then the last one is actually a marketplace application. It's a technology company that helps locals find contractors, essentially. So if you want a plumber, if you want somebody to mow your lawn, if you want somebody to just do a quick task like TaskRabbit, they're definitely going after that sector, but managing the entire service line. So from the wholesale to the actual items used to actual delivery, yes, of the product to the implementation. They want to create a one-stop location where you can go and manage that. So yeah, they're doing some great stuff. Already have some traction. Have raised over $350,000 in the past. So
nice.
Yeah, they're definitely doing some great stuff. Like we're new at this, and definitely we're learning too. The Canadian appetite is very different than any other market. We're more conservative.
Sure. Right,
we're more conservative here.
Right. Definitely.
And so we're slowly learning how to cater our language and help people understand better, because I think understanding, like in other countries, if you look at the US and the UK, investors are very quick to buy. They a pretty video and a little bit of marketing can sell somebody on it's like a Kickstarter experience, even though it's a security purchase. Here it's very different. People are smart and they want to do their due diligence. So we're trying to provide as much information as possible so that people can make those types of decisions and feel like a VC, feel like a dragon. That's the experience we want to make people feel like. And so presenting all that information in a concise way, which they could understand, and providing our knowledge and access to us when they have questions is really important. And that's what we're leaning in. And actually, we have two more companies that are coming up, really cool ones. One that I think you'll really like. It's a esports company. So they help. Right now, their biggest part of their company is managing tournaments. So they help help esports businesses, even gamers, live streamers, all those people manage essentially their esports world, from streaming to managing a tournament to even slightly into the betting, getting in there. They have some big partners in that space, and I exciting. Their first campaign is going to be actually launching this Friday, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Will that be on your Twitter as well, on the site? Will that be?
Oh yeah. We just sent out a newsletter to all our subscribers telling them about it, and the responses that we've been getting so far has been great. So a lot of people excited about the esports space. So we're happy to launch them.
That's great. Let's talk about how has the fundraising changed? COVID era versus pre-COVID. Like, where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah. So definitely pre-COVID, we were on an up, right? Like I think angel investment was on the up. There was, a lot of capital readily available, but the second something happens like this, like any sort of downturn of any sort, angels look internally. They go and say, hey, I'm going to work on my portfolio companies. I'm going to spend my dollars on making sure the assets and the investments that I've already made survive. So that means they're taking that from somewhere, and then they're going to be taking that from any of their new business. So an unfortunate fact is, there aren't many options for startups these days. And, like capital, like I mentioned before, undercapitalization is the number one reason why businesses fail. And so you don't have much capital. You're trying to bootstrap your company, and then you hit a roadblock. You need to, you have to decide whether you're going to be working full time or, taking on this business. And sometimes startups need that type of dedication. And so you need to have a salary for yourself. And so, yes, a lot of businesses are getting into a very, very, very difficult situation. But equity crowdfunding and this sort of community investment, I've been seeing it on the debt side too, with companies like Lending Loop, like it's growing immensely. And what's very surprising is small businesses and startups are turning to their community for this type of support, because they're not finding it from the government. They're not finding it from these larger investors, and it's working. We've been having a mass influx of people who have signed up on our site, over 600 investors so far, and we've only been launched for a little over a month.
Amazing.
So it's definitely a growing space. But like I mentioned before, the decision-making process for an investor in Canada is much longer. The time that they take to look at a deal, the type of information they want to see. So it's really about getting these companies well practiced and rehearsed to answer those types of questions, and presenting their campaign in a way that a Canadian investor would want to see it.
Right. Because I think here we're more conservative, right?
Absolutely.
So great. So what's the next exciting thing for Equivesto?
For us, it's really about getting that user base up, and telling as many people about this as possible. This is still a very, very new thing.
True.
And most people we talk to, they're like, of course I've heard of crowdfunding. I've been on Kickstarter all the time. And separating that concept that this is actually a security purchase, right? Like you're going, people know about the public markets, of course, right? They go to the TSX, they go to the stock exchange, and they go and buy these shares, and they think it's the exact same area. But the private space, interestingly enough, is one of the most untapped areas. And it's actually, don't quote me on this, but it is true, is where the majority of the wealth has been made in the world. And so many people have not, had the access or the ability to participate in this, and they're afraid to, because of lack of education in this type of market. We've taught about the public markets, but we're never taught about the private markets unless you're privileged or you're from those networks. So for us, it's about educating as much as possible. We have a whole series of videos that we're launching soon. We actually have an entire learning center that we've built. Like I'm talking about thousands of pages of information to help educate people about the private markets and cater both towards investors and companies so that they can go on there, read the information, digest, and maybe apply it to themselves and maybe potentially take on a little bit of this. So that's it. That's it for us. You know, it's about becoming that community player, educating
Right.
as many people as possible,
Right.
and then trying to grow our user base.
Awesome. So exciting. So for our audience that want to learn about Equivesto, where can they go?
Sure. Tons of places. We're on every social media. Obviously, being a crowdfunding platform,
Right.
we have to engage with the crowd. So you can find us on every single social media you've ever heard of, and at equivesto.com.
Equivesto.com. Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to connect with our community and connecting with us. It's been a pleasure connecting with you. So we're looking forward to the development with Equivesto, and we'll be spreading the word to the startups about your platform. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Eric.